shell lands close to their base. He takes his rifle and immediately heads out to order his men to take cover. He calms as he gives clear instructions to some of his panicking men. He orders them to find out where the mortars are coming from. One pipe up, the HQ had reported they're coming from Long Phuoc. Smith argues that they instead must be coming from Long Tan. Sharp and a couple of other soldiers are playing a card game and drinking their beers when Smith calls for Sharp's attention to inform him of the obvious. He tells Smith to calm down since they're in the middle of a game. Fed up, he takes the group's stable and slams it back down, then commands them to get their weapons and man their position. Thomas reports to Smith to inform him that he has been bearing for the mortars. He tells Mori to triangulate the reported bearings, to which the other man asks if it isn't the base gunner's job. Smith corrects him, telling him that it's his job to find the enemy and direct the artillery onto them. Townsend briefs his majors that the enemies know what they're doing since they targeted their guns and their task force HQ with a count of 1 dead and 23 wounded. Fortunately, artillery drove them back. They're now setting up Operation Vendetta to bring them down. Smith volunteers the Delta Company to go, but Townsend rebuffs him and talks directly to Ford instead. He notifies Townsend that he has men due to leave the next day, to which Smith mentions that he has 108 men ready at a notice, but Townsend chides him about having other companies in the battalion decide this. Weston and Top meet up with Buick, who updates them that they'll be joining him in the 11th Platoon. He tells them that Delta is the best company in the battalion since they work harder, march further, and shoot straighter than anybody else. Weston asks if Smith is as tough as they say he is, and Buick tells him that he's tougher. Large reports to Smith and hands over his rifle. They talk briefly about guns, with Large declaring that he's a good shot since he grew up hunting rabbits. Smith asks him if he was such a good shot, how did he miss an enemy soldier last night? He criticizes Large and takes the younger man by the throat, angry that he misfired last night. Thoroughly reprimanded, Smith dismisses them. Smith overhears Bravo Company's report that they have completed their search of the Longtown area and have located mortar-based plates, rifles, shell cases, and body parts. They confirm that the enemies were killed in action. He heads for Jackson and requests for a minute. He asserts that he should be in command of other professionals, but finds himself babysitting conscripts. He claims that his experience and skills were wasted doing so. Jackson comments that Smith thinks he deserves to be back with his unit since Townsend doesn't appreciate him. But Jackson doesn't care about his feelings. He's to follow Townsend's orders the same way. Townsend follows Jackson's orders as that's how the army works. Little Patty, a musician, arrives and her escort is immediately intercepted by Large and Grimes. They make it seem like they were personally assigned to assist her by Jackson. Large asks for a kiss for Grimes, which Little Patty finds cute. She agrees to it and gives Grimes a quick kiss on the cheek. Fortunately, since the Delta Company set to relieve Bravo, they miss Little Patty and Colonel Joy, and Joy Boys set for that afternoon, which the group loudly complains about and gets told off by Buick. On their way, the group openly talks about Smith. Large comments that he doesn't care about them, which Sharp notes isn't the man's job. Kirby updates Sharp that he'll be leading 11th Platoon to chase after Bullock car tracks. Smith approaches him to remove his sunglasses and spur him to show him that he's leader. Before leaving, Smith tells Large to keep an eye out for rabbits. 11th Platoon came across a couple of North Vietnamese soldiers. Buick takes a shot and Sharp reports that they've made contact with the enemy. Smith advises them to give chase and keep them updated. They come across a hut where the wounded soldier likely received medical attention since the table is filled with gauzes and blood. Everybody's keeping an eye out when the enemy starts firing machine guns. Sharp calls for Grice and his radio to report the situation. 10 Platoon are advised to move out and provide support to 11 Platoon. 12 Platoon, on the other hand, are sent to reinforce HQ. Sharp calls for artillery and provides the coordinates. Townsend agrees. While the artillery support helps, the North Vietnamese soldiers keep pouring in. Townsend gets Jackson up to speed and finishes that 11 platoons flanked on all sides with backup on their way. They're estimating that the enemy's a whole platoon as well. Jackson states that Delta can handle a platoon. 10 Platoon arrives in time to take down a couple of North Vietnamese soldiers. The enemies scramble, and as 10 platoons attack, their radio takes a hit and won't be able to reach the others. Kendall decides to hold their position since they can't move without comms and asks Hornung to find Smith and the rest. Unfortunately, Sharp is skilled trying to provide coordinates for artillery. Buick takes over and reports that they're low on ammo and at half strength and will need more artillery. He also informs Smith that Sharp's dead. Hornung arrives bearing news about the 10 Platoon and his damaged radio. Smith inquires point blank if they're withdrawing, and he explains that they've taken too much fire and can't move without radio. Large, unable to sit still knowing that 10 Platoon and 11 Platoon are under attack, tells Grimes that he'll find a way through 11 Platoon. A North Vietnamese sniper attacks the 11 Platoon from the hut. They yell for Eggy to rake the hut. He successfully hits the lone sniper, but this is just the prelude to the next round of attack from the enemy, and hundreds of North Vietnamese soldiers come running and firing. Buick concludes that they're surrounded not by a platoon, but rather a battalion. Smith requests for reinforcements as well as U.S. air support. The fight continues and 11 Platoon loses more men, even with artillery support. Smith orders 11 Platoon to throw smoke as U.S. air support flies by. Buick throws the only smoke grenade he finds from McCormack's pack, but it doesn't deploy, and their air support passes them. With no smoke, Smith directs the said air support to unload east of Long Ton Road instead. Almost out of ammo and unable to move, Buick calls for mortars to be dropped in their position instead. Maury notifies Smith of Buick's request. Smith asks Buick to repeat. He repeats that they are flanked on all sides and about to be overrun. He asks for them to target their location. Maury refuses and Buick argues that they'll still be dead either way. Smith thinks it's over for a minute, but gives the go signal to call it in. After the explosion, Smith and Maury attempt to make contact with 11 Platoon and hears nothing but static on the other end. Larch returns and tells Grimes that he found a way to the 11 Platoon, but Grimes updates him that there's no longer an 11 Platoon since Smith called in artillery on their position. In his anger, Larch attacks and curses at Smith. He orders Larch to stand down before they're attacked by the enemy. Smith reports back to HQ that they're being attacked now and looking for the supposed reinforcement. Jackson refuses to send backup since he believes it's a trap and the goal is to attack the base. Townsend answers Smith to let him know that no reinforcements are available and that the mission has changed. They're expected to return to the base immediately. Smith tells them to shove it and maintain that they all come back or no one does. Kirby laughs and asks what their plan is now. Smith replies that they're to find 11 Platoon and rescue any survivors. Large blurts out that he found a way to 11 Platoon. He instructs Maury to follow Large to check on 11 Platoon, then proclaim that they also need to know what's happening to 10 Platoon. The soldier Smith sent over 10 Platoon arrives, and Kendall finally gets back on comms. Smith asks for their status, to which Kendall informs him they're pinned by enemy fire on 3 sides, taking casualties and running low on ammo. Smith orders them to withdraw with their wounded over their location. Riley, leading a volunteer-only mission, successfully drops ammunition to Smith's location despite resistance from Jackson and Townsend. He wishes them luck and returns to base. Finally, reaching the last known location of the 11 Platoon and under heavy fire, Sabin commands Larch to throw a smoke grenade as close as he can to the hut where they suspect 11 had sheltered in. They cheer when they find Buick and the rest of the platoon slowly making their way towards them. He informs Smith that they have the remaining 11 Platoon and are instructed to bring them back. With the knowledge that the 11 Platoon's recovered and the rest of the Delta Company need retrieval, Townsend formally appeals to Jackson to lead the Armored Personnel Carrier, or APC. Jackson argues that if he loses the APC, 1 infantry will be left to protect the base, which means 100 men defending 300 support staff. According to intel, a second full-sized enemy regiment is on its way. He refuses to offer assistance to Delta and believes that the company's finished, which Townsend disagrees with. If Delta can hold and the APC breaks up the attack, the base can be secured by taking the fight to the enemy. This time, Jackson gives in but refuses to send out Townsend. 11 Platoon gets back to HQ, and Buick expresses his gratitude to Smith for doing what he asked, even though it must have been difficult for the other man. He reiterates that if they hadn't done it, then none of them would have survived. Townsend escapes Jackson's watchful eye under the excuse that he's checking the base's defense and calls for an APC to fetch him. North Vietnamese soldiers blare their horn, and Smith informs his company that the enemy's on their way. Close to the Delta Company's location, they're ordered to wait for Townsend to catch up. Roberts curses and confirms but leaves only 1 APC behind, while the rest head for Smith's and his company's location. As Smith attempts to lift their spirits up with a rousing speech, Grimes looks over to Large in tears and asks the other man if they're gonna make it. The comms were down momentarily after a lightning strike, but Maury is successful in sending another round of coordinates with a warning that it's close to their position. The enemies are extremely close now, but the Delta Company is holding steady. Smith shoots a North Vietnamese soldier up close as the other man attempts to attack him with a machete. Larch looks over to him and after confirming that he's alright, faces their enemies again. However, one comes too close and fires a shot into his forehead, killing him. Grimes rushes to his side, screaming while Smith is rendered flummoxed at the display. More enemies pour in and everything's looking bleak. Despite the ammunition drop-off earlier, the company finds themselves scrambling for something to defend themselves as they reach the end of their rifles. Smith, still standing with only a pistol on hand, drops down when the APCs start shooting at the enemy soldiers. With no way to defend themselves against the APCs and the reinforcement arriving, the enemy retreats. Smith becomes emotional when he finds Large's lifeless body sprawled out next to him. But after making sure that they're safe, Smith reports back to base that the battlefield's secured. Jackson appears relieved despite his initial refusal. The wounded are tended to, and those with even worse injuries are taken away by a chopper. Townsend said to Smith that God was shining brightly on them that day, as well as the history books. He sips on his mug and claims that they did a job well done. Irked, Smith walks away from him with a grimace. The next day, Buick calls out for the remaining men part of Delta Company. Those who answer are well